Welcome to the F1 2026 Austrian Grand Prix reaction, joined by Sahwgunn. So, what a weekend! Generally, the entire weekend was just great. Qualifying very tight, very unexpected result in the end. We saw many teams battling at the front. Almost looked like either of the top four teams could take pole position in the race. Also, we had pretty much a battle right to the end, with the top three finishing up within 3 seconds of each other. A very interesting weekend, and there's a lot to talk about. So, start with qualifying. So, we had George Russell on pole position, thanks to a fairly controversial thing in the end, in Q3. Essentially happened that Max crashed in the penultimate turn. The single yellow flag was brought out. I was like, straight up, yeah, this is a red flag. It's no one going to improve. This is it. Ferrari won too. And then suddenly, 10 seconds later, George Russell comes across the line to take pole position by like 3/10 of a second. Uh, it was strange at that point. At that point, I was home. I was looking at the TV. I was like, yeah, there's no way they can count that. He improved by quite a bit, and he should have like slowed down, right? The last sector. I thought it was double yellows at minimum, which should indicate that the driver has to significantly slow down. A single yellow flag is only basically you have to lift at least some kind of a bit to not set the fastest sector of your own, which Russell has accomplished, and in the end his lap times stood because yeah, apparently there was only a single yellow flag with a car in the wall right next to the track, well, like 30 meters. Yeah, very strange, but on the verge of rules and regulations, and George Russell did a very smart thing that he knew the limits of the rules, and yeah, he played his car as well and got pole position. Wasn't looking like the faster driver at the Mercedes at the point, and he really needed this for his especially for his mental state take in his championship fight. So it must be difficult being so far behind his teammate at this point. Yeah, interesting, and yeah, good job from George. P2 we had Leclerc, and P3 Hamilton. So those two Ferraris who set those laps right before the red flag. It wasn't a red flag. It was like Max crash. We said that Antonelli also had a run, but Antonelli lifted off because he thought it was double yellow, which I thought it was as well. Those Ferraris were pretty competitive. So did Max up until his crash. He looked like a challenge for the front row at minimum. And yeah. In the end, it was a Ferrari 2-3 with Antonelli P4. And it was Max and the McLarens. It was very tight, it has to be said, between like Leclerc and P2 and even I think it was Hajar and P8, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, the top 4 teams basically were very much bunched up, and it was pretty close, which is always good to see. Yeah, P4, therefore Antonelli P5, Max Verstappen. So yeah, he has a point. Ajax gets a point for qualifying for P5 Max Verstappen. I had Max on pole. I was thinking he could do it, and he could. He had the car for it definitely this weekend. Unfortunately, sometimes these things happen, and even the best at their best sometimes do these kind of mistakes. There's a rumor going around that he had some kind of a rear ring issue, that he couldn't close his rear ring, but when you look at the footage, it's completely closed. So yeah, I'm not really sure what was meant to be there, but yeah. Rest of the qualifying, McLaren's behind, and then Hajar fairly close to Max in terms of time, like time per lap. So another good qualifying from Hajar. And you had the two Racing Bulls completing the top 10. Yeah, pretty clear of the rest of the midfield, especially in the race pace as well. rest of qualifying, I don't think there's much interesting happening. Honestly, yeah, they're pretty much finished where they should have. Aston Martin's far behind anyone else. Yeah, what you would expect. But the race itself was good. Well, it was great from start to finish. It was interesting. There was always something to look at. Uh, Even though I was there in this ultra heat that was there at the time, the TV doesn't tell the full picture. When you're at the track, present right there in that heat, you cannot even imagine that from the TV and just how hot it was. And yeah, kudos to the drivers for driving in these kind of conditions in an F1 car, which is already pretty hot itself, but especially inside, it's like up to like 50 to 60 degrees, I think, cockpit. So yeah, but very very difficult for the drivers and for the fans as well, especially those who didn't have any protection from the sunlight because it was like 35, 36 degrees, and yeah, there was barely any cover, barely anything to hide from the sunlight, so it was very difficult. But yeah, all in all, very interesting Grand Prix. See, at the start, um, you would think that George probably would be attacked by the Ferraris, and ended up being not the case. There was a scrap between Antonelli and Leclerc at the start. Leclerc had some weird stuff going on with the power unit. Antonelli almost crashed into him. Antonelli actually went off the track like 4 times in the first couple of laps. So, couple of track limits there. Yeah, Antonelli had a very messy start, but had the pace to push through. The rest of the drivers, yeah, I mean, Ferrari didn't have much pace the entire race. Hamilton looked like this faster Ferrari, but the strategy from the Ferrari team is not great. For either driver, it was just not good. Hamilton could have fought for maybe not finish, but fought for a podium, at least if it wasn't for that bad strategy decision to pit on the virtual safety car. Max had tremendous pace, probably arguably the fastest driver on the race day. Finished less than 2 seconds behind George in the end. The Red Bull was rapid, and this is something very good for Formula One. When you have Max at the top, it always makes it interesting. And yeah, now we have 4 teams capable of battling for the lead, because we obviously had Ferrari win, Mercedes as a self-explanatory. McLaren could have won a Grand Prix. They already won a sprint. And Red Bull now had the pace. Berger with the fastest car on the race stream in Verstappen's head specifically, because Hajar still struggles compared to Max in race pace. So it definitely has to be said that those Red Bull cars and rapid in Austria. Yeah. Going through the results, obviously George Russell winning in the end. He didn't look like he was meant to extend his stint. It was confirmed that George Russell managed his tires the entire race. Ended up having like no gap behind him. He essentially just managed his tires in case he needed those tires to fight wheel to wheel for the win. And in the end, he didn't, because he maintained the gap just enough for Max and Kimi to not catch him, essentially, because those two had nothing to lose. They obviously pushed maximum they could. George was just trying to manage the gap, and in the end won convincingly. Hard to say, but I mean, at that time you could argue that George wasn't as quick as the two behind him over race distance. But yeah, George didn't need to push. He didn't need to do anything. He just needs to stay in front and win. That's how George Russell wins his Grand Prix. He always finishes like a couple of seconds at most ahead of the second place driver whenever he wins. That's an interesting statistics. Like when you combine all his race victories, there's only like a 20-second gap from P2 combined from all of his victories, which is crazy stuff. Yeah, always wins tight races, and this was one of them. Max in P2, so I get a point for Max in P2 in the Grand Prix. Crazy. P3 Antonelli, P4 Piastri, and P5 was Lewis Hamilton, so no points there. The rest of that. The rest of the top 5, I mean, for top 8, should I say. Piastri had a very good race. He had some very good speed. Was marginally quicker than Lando, but managed his stints better, I would say. Had some battles. I don't know. Caught his way up to P4, which ended up giving him P4 in the driver's standings as well. 1 point ahead of Leclerc and Norris. 2 points, I believe, ahead of Verstappen or 3. It's just very close. That battle for P4 in the standings. P5 Lewis, I mean, he didn't have strategy to fight, but P5, I think there was more on the table. Not necessarily from the driver, but I think Hamilton could have finished P4 minimum if both he and the team would have executed the race perfectly. That being said, they didn't. P5, Lewis Hamilton. P6, Isaac Hajar showed some good speed. I think it was a lot down to the car being very quick around this track. And Max almost winning. Hajar was battling with those Ferraris and McLarens and held his own. I mean, it's just something that we haven't seen in a long time. Like Red Bull second driver being up there in the fight with the top teams and actually beating them, because Hajar started in P8, finished P6. He beat Norris and Leclerc on pace, which just has to be admired, because it's something. He's still a long way behind Max in terms of race pace. There's no doubt about that, but he's actually there and he delivers points. That's very important for Red Bull, especially in Constructors League, because last year they didn't have a number 2 driver. It was like all Max in Constructors. So yeah, Hajar scoring points is very, very good for Red Bull. P7 Lando. Yeah, the strategy wasn't great, and neither was his speed really. I mean, he didn't look that quick from what I looked the entire race. So yeah, and Leclerc, I mean, both the strategy and the driver. Leclerc is in a very bad run of form currently, and it's a question of time whenever he actually bounces back. But up until then, when it happens, it's just the gap builds up between him and Lewis, and him being beaten by a teammate the first time since 2021 on points would be interesting to say, because Leclerc he's been like in the group with like George, Lando, Oscar for the next behind Max group, and he was often classified as the best of them. It was like most people thought that he was the best driver behind Max. It doesn't really look like it at the moment. Last year he pretty much destroyed Lewis, and this year it's looking the other way around, except that Leclerc has the pace, not quite the level of Lewis right now, but he has the pace to finish close to him at least. I mean, I qualified him after all. Definitely probably not as bad as Lewis last year, but still not ideal. In P9, P10, the Racing Bulls cars, they were in their pretty much in the world of their own. They were miles behind the top 8 and ahead of the rest of the midfield, which was behind them, behind the points making position. So Racing Bulls had a very quiet race. Both of them battled quite a bit. with each other because they were so close. They had no one to else to fight, so they just fought each other. Those are some interesting overtake by Lawson, a double overtake that you could see in some highlight reels on the internet. Yeah, there's some interesting bits that people could have missed. But and the rest of the field, I mean, there's the Audis, there's the Alpines. Didn't have the pace to do much in the race. They were just cruising around. I looked at them every lap and just couldn't do much. Racing Bulls were just too clear, and the rest of the midfielders couldn't do anything but cruise for 70 plus laps around the track. Some of them DNF'd, mainly Cadillacs, Stroll, I believe, and also one of the Williams's. Sainz actually stopped in the middle of the start-finish straight, approximately 40 meters away from me. He jumped out of his car, and the marshals just brought it through the pit lane. They closed the pit lane for a brief moment to actually get Sainz's car into the garage, and opened it. It was during the virtual safety car, so some people could pit in, and then some other couldn't because they closed the pit entry. Yeah. Most of the other things that happen are forgettable, but there's some other categories of predictions to go through. So driver of the weekend, Esteban Ocon was invisible, to be honest. I haven't seen much during the entire weekend. I don't know where Haas finished. I think they were one of the slowest cars out there for the midfield. Nothing really much to say. Max, I mean, tremendous race, but he bottled qualifying. Has to be said. So, not driver of the weekend for sure. When it comes to driver of the weekend, who would I give this to? I would probably lean over to George Russell because he's been having the greatest season so far, and this is like one of the weekends that he really needed since Australia. He controlled the win and won, not in a dominant fashion, but in a controlled way. He knew what he was doing and got the win. And then no one else gonna take that win away from him now. He's a double winner, two-time winner at Austria now, thanks to the 2024 double DNF from the title fight between Lando and Max. Good for him. He's now 41 points, I believe, behind Anthony, or maybe 40. He's definitely closed up by 10 points now. So, fight on. And we'll see if George can further climb that on the gap, because 40 points is still quite a lot. And he would ideally need to win a Silverstone with Anthony DNFing. Then 15 points is kind of playable. It's way more playable than 40 points. I think George really needs to have a really good run of races for him to be considered in a title fight after the summer break. Because if he's still 40 points behind, whenever it's more than 40 points, I think people are gonna just think that Anthony has this, because Anthony has been the better driver this season. Has to be said. George has had some really bad luck, but Anthony has been the better driver with some fair share of bad luck as well. Like seems pain, and so on. Okay, now driver of the weekend, George. Garage of the weekend. Definitely not McLaren or Ferrari. Racing was a shot. Red Bull, I would say Red Bull, because their pace was generally terrific. It was very good. It was on par with Mercedes, if not quicker, in Max's hands over a race distance, and they were in the fight for pole position as well. So I would say Red Bull is, in my opinion, the garage of the weekend for this one. Just gives Ajax another point. Audi not even close. Blunder of the weekend. Lando Norris and George Russell. Neither of them, I think, were blunderish. Lando didn't have this best weekend. It's probably his worst weekend in Austria by a mile, but not tragic by any means. And George Russell, obviously, the driver of the weekend, my opinion. Which driver would I give this to? Probably. Let me think. Let me think. I don't think there's a specific driver that could give this to. Honestly, think about it. Probably Leclerc. I mean, going from P2 to P, although he still qualified P2, so just difficult to say. Um, yeah, honestly, don't know. I don't think there's anyone I can this to, and I don't have choices here to essentially help in decide. So I'm gonna leave this up for interpretation. Anyone can have their own guess. I think there's was the blunder of the weekend this time around. Ferrari of the weekend was for a team. I don't think Alpine necessarily qualifies. I mean, they have had a pretty weak weekend during those previous ones. I mean, they're scoring points regularly. Gasly was very close to Max before this Grand Prix, to Max and driver standings. Which have changed. I think Alpine is a shout. It's the Cadillac double DNF. Absolutely horrible reliability the entire weekend. They're always stopping on track, always on fire. It was really difficult to look at. I mean, Aston is always bad, and the rest of the teams were just kind of meh. I mean, some of the drivers were right, some of them weren't. Definitely not in any of the top four teams. I mean, Ferrari probably the weakest of the top four, but definitely not the Ferrari of the weekend. I think this goes to Alpine, so I'm gonna give Sahwgunn another point. It's also me, so fastest lap goes to Kimi Antonelli. This is another point for me. I also won a competition we had with our trip. The entire bus predicted the exact time of the fastest lap. I was 1/10 off, I believe, and I also predicted Antonelli. So technically, I won. And yeah, I won a Ferrari Lego miniature like thingy. So yeah, I haven't opened it yet, but I may this weekend. We'll see. And Demolition War. I think the only driver who has properly crashed was Max. So this has to go Max to Max Verstappen. Because to Pamela Board prediction, another British podium, no. Leclerc to win the race and Hamilton the DNF, no. Well, actual prediction, 10 plus penalties in the Grand Prix. That's not true, and Anthony have Norris win. It's also not true. Extractable prediction, Stroll top 10 in the Grand Prix. Did not happen, and Piastri, Hamilton, Verstappen podium did not happen either. One of them was on the podium and the wrong place, so yeah, not even close. And that's it for the predictions. So the copy the find format formula. So 29 to 28, I retake the lead of the prediction standings and AGX by a single point. Then we can move over to the driver ratings. So I'm gonna go for AGX's first. I have it in front of me. He was generous to give me his picks. He's gonna take over the predictions. So let's start with from the top. So George Russell at 10, Kimi Antonelli at 8, Leclerc at 4, Lewis at 7, Norris at 5, Oscar at 8, both Racing Bulls at 7. Max had a 9, at 7, Ocon, let me see, a 4, Berman at 5, Warsaw at 2, 5, Hülkenberg 5, Colapinto, there is a Colapinto, Franco a 3, Gasly a 5, and we have Sainz 4, Alex Albon a 3, Stroll 2, Alonso 5, Perez 3, Bottas 3. Honestly, kind of like sort of very strange. I mean, they couldn't do much, really. could you really do in that kind of situation when your car literally wants to blow up every time it goes out on track? Uh, I don't exactly remember the qualifying results, so I'm gonna put this up. So Perez outqualified Valtteri Bottas by just under a tenth of a second. So yeah, that's very comparable, and both have qualified Aston Martins, but they couldn't do anything else. Cadillac was looking quicker this weekend compared to the rest of the field, but I mean, relative to the rest of the field, I mean, they weren't any quicker than any of the other teams than Aston Martin, but they couldn't do much. Their car was kept blowing up. So essentially, yeah, Perez, I'm gonna give Perez 5.5 and Bottas a 5. Yeah, nothing really they could do. Fernando Alonso and Stroll, both of them P21, P22. Stroll also DNF'd, and Alonso couldn't do anything because his car was absolute dog shit. So Alonso gets a 6 for I guess for our qualifying Stroll, and Stroll and I don't know, 3.5. Sainz, a qualified Albon. That's about it because Williams were third slowest team this weekend. Head of Aston Martin and Cadillacs, but that's about it. Weren't looking strong at all, and Sainz gets a 6, Alex a 5. I'm not okay do. I mean, Sainz obviously DNF as well because his car broke down. Start finish straight. Racing Bulls, I think they both did well. They're next to each other the entire race pretty much, and the entire qualifying as well. Both got points and maximized the weekend because they couldn't touch until 14 this weekend. Let's be real. Alpine, yeah, they have a good weekend as a team. For the drivers, I mean, we can't do much. Gasly was close to top to do a Q3, but in the end, didn't get through. And Colapinto was P16, so that's not great. Colapinto gets the 3, and Gasly gets the 5. 5.5, I would say. Bortoleto was the better driver at Audi this weekend. Not like a huge amount, but there was a gap between those two drivers. Hockenberg didn't qualify well, and his race pace was slower than Bortoleto. So Bortoleto gets a 6.5. Hockenberg gets 4.5 for me. Behrman outqualified Ocon, but that's kind of what you expect at the moment, and the Hasses were not great. So similar to the Audis, I would say a 6 and 4. I'll give those two below a high rating because they qualified their Hasses, and it's difficult to say which of the teams were quicker, but those two were finished ahead. So I'm gonna give half a point each for to Audi. You can call it biased. It doesn't really matter. Half a point doesn't do much in the end. Verstappen and Hajar. Max, I mean, crashing qualifying. He could have won this race, I think, if he started from the front row. Definitely could have fought for the lead minimum. I think he would have won the race if he had started from the front row. So bowling qualifying was not great. I'm gonna give in an difficult, right? He still finished P2, but the potential was to finish P1, and on race racing, his car was the fastest, as to be said. I'm gonna give it an 8. I'm not saying that might sound harsh, but should have finished higher in qualifying, really. Hajar, decent in qualifying, very close to Max in the end, and race pace did some very good stuff and finished P6. So I'm gonna give Hajar a 7. Lando and Oscar. Oscar had a qualified Lando and outraced Lando. Oscar gets an 8.5. I mean, he did the most he could, really. Lando gets a 7. I mean, he wasn't that slow. I mean, he was very, very close in qualifying between the McLarens. And Actually, when look at it, actually, my bad. Lando has qualified Oscar Piastri by 9 thousandths of a second. I don't know why I thought it was otherwise. I think I remember Q2 results because they're very similar. Uh, yeah, my bad. Norris actually qualified Piastri. Piastri was the better driver in the race, which actually means that I have to lower Piastri to 8, I think. Uh, maybe Norris at 6.5. Leclerc, not great. I mean, qualifying was good, but the race not as good. It's a 6. Finished P8. It's the bare minimum for a top 4 team, and his qualifying was good. So that's where this comes from. Lewis Hamilton very close to Charles in qualifying, and the race was the better driver at Ferrari. I think a similar thing. Hamilton finished behind Piastri, so 7.5. Similar thing with the Haas and Audis. George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. Kimi was very unfortunate in qualifying and couldn't finish that lap. Neither could George really. I mean, he lifted and finished the lap, but I'm trying to say that George definitely was not even close to his potential because he was quicker after the first two sectors than Kimi. Probably would have taken pole position anyway, but I think it should have been P2 instead of P4. That was kind of unlucky, but in the race, the start was kind of messy. Until he didn't do much the first like quarter of the race, and then his race pace really kicked in. Mercedes was very strong on race pace, and especially Kimi was his race pace basically cleared his way onto the podium. Pretty much beat Lewis and Oscar by sheer race pace. Mercedes was just that good, and in the end, very close to actually both George and Max. He caught them pretty well. He was, I think, like less than a second behind Max in the end. Yeah. A good weekend from Kimi. Just unlucky here and there, and yeah, but he still showed some great pace and had a good weekend. I'm gonna give Kimi an 8 as well, like just like Ajax. Yeah, a similar thing, similar rating to Piastri. It makes sense. Also, George Russell though. And maybe pace-wise it wasn't as dominant, but it was a clean pole to win weekend that he really needed at this point of the season, and he didn't really put a foot wrong, right? He led almost the entire race because later on, both Antonelli and Verstappen stayed out, so we couldn't quite get that Grand Slam, but Russell Grand Slam because I got the fastest lap as well. Yeah, generally Russell did what he should have done, and yeah, I'm gonna. I don't know whether it's a 10 necessarily. Yeah, he did. He got the pole position and got the win. I guess I can give him a 10. Yeah, these are the ratings for the Austrian Grand Prix. We'll actually bunch them all up at the end of the season. We'll see the average for each driver by each of us individually and combined, and the rating combined is gonna give you the idea of who was just how good for the entire season, because we're doing this race by race, so it's more accurate, more data, and less bias when it comes to recency. So when we did those ever 6 races, it was kind of recency bias in there sometimes when driver had a good race in race 6 of that segment. Yeah, this is it, and we'll see you in the British Grand Prix predictions. That's going to be covered by Ajax. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching, listening. Every interaction is much appreciated. And we'll see you next time. Peace.